Today I'm here to bring you another installment of Disturbing Campfire Stories from the Walking Dead universe. This is the series where I highlight the shorter stories from the franchise that are still interesting, but don't necessarily warrant their own entire video. If you're enjoying this type of content, be sure to hit that like button and drop a sub to see more videos like this. From a very young age, Gabriel Stokes had formed a strong relationship with God and had always desired to bring others together through faith. In his adult years, he acted as a guide for those struggling with direction in life as he would continue to practice his beliefs, eventually becoming the priest of St. Sarah's Episcopal Church in rural Georgia. Although his strange humor left much to be desired, his flock would grow and look to him for guidance as he conducted weekly mass and participated in food drives for the community charity, eventually growing close with the church's organist and possibly developing a full-on relationship with her. Father Gabriel had a good life, and seemed to have been a genuinely thoughtful, caring, and generous person, but when the dead began to walk, he would be tested by God and fail. Barricading his church, Gabe would panic as the news reports on TV went silent. Although it wasn't exactly the right thing to do, he would survive off of the charity fundraiser supplies that hadn't yet made its way to the food bank, locking himself inside out of fear as the world fell outside his walls. But the worst was yet to come, as 2 weeks after the lights went out across the world, the US military would begin to drop napalm on every major metropolitan city in the country in an attempt to contain the hordes of undead. The members of Gabriel's congregation and families who survived the flames would make their way out to the countryside by dawn, arriving at the church that they once considered a place of guidance. Needing direction now more than ever, they would shout and beg Father Gabriel to show them charity like he used to, but the doors were locked, and no answer was coming through. Instead of welcoming those he once considered family inside, Gabe would cower in fear while listening to their pleas, fearing there wouldn't be enough supplies for himself if he let them in. And as the shouting grew louder, the dead would begin emerging from the woods. Despite his desire to bring others together and guide them through hard times, Gabriel would allow the walkers to rip his congregation apart while he sat in cowardice, listening to them claw at the window boards as they begged for mercy, choosing to allow not only adults, but children to die due to his inaction as well. As the sun rose higher, Gabriel would bury every single bone left behind in the bloody tragedy, discovering the clawing sounds were really messages carved onto his church in his congregation's final moments, damning him to hell for what he did. Gabriel had once associated the sounds of the forest with his childhood, but now, the sounds filled him with horror and shame as he would continue to lock himself inside the church's walls for the next 18 months, eventually running out of the food he allowed those he loved to die over. Scavenging the area slowly over time, Gabriel would eventually arrive at the community food bank, hoping to find scraps left behind, but instead discovers the reanimated body of the organist, someone he deeply cared for more than any other. It's unknown if she had died at the church along with the others and simply wandered away before he made his way outside, but the thought it could have been his fault would eat away at him for the rest of his days. This story shows us the consequences of cowardice. Gabriel feared for his own safety only at a time where those who looked to him for direction needed it most. What he did was undeniably a despicable act, but Gabe does get a moment of redemption many years later during the Commonwealth Revolution, where he would be the one to open the gates to save the city's residents from a walker horde, showing us how much he has grown as a character since those dark times. Gabriel may not have been my favorite character when we first met him, but by the end of the series he was far from the coward we once saw him as. During the community reunification fair in The Walking Dead Season 9, the Whisperers would infiltrate and kidnap 11 people during the festivities, decapitating 10 of them and using their heads to mark a border. Sadiq was one of these victims, but instead of receiving the same fate as all the rest, he would be forced to watch his friends die one by one with his eyes physically held open as a whisperer makes a horrific clicking sound in his ear. Sadiq was left alive to tell the others the horrors he saw, but in a way, he wished he wasn't, as he would have moments of PTSD over the coming months triggered by the continued Cold War between the Whisperers that would begin to wear down his mental health. The only thing keeping him grounded was the birth of his daughter Coco, but that haunting clicking sound had burned its way into his mind and began to creep into his daily life as his breakdowns grew worse. He would keep this to himself the best he could, but being a doctor, he had no choice but to spend a lot of his time around others, especially Dante, a newcomer to the safe zone with medical experience who would spend the majority of his days with Sadiq working with patients, noticing the struggles he was going through over time. Sadiq was really apprehensive to open up to him at first given his strange personality, but would slowly accept his friendship as they shared similar life experiences. But as things continued to go wrong with a mysterious illness sweeping through Alexandria, the stress would begin to overwhelm him, causing a Whisperer that was taken prisoner by Daryl and Carol to die in his medical care due to his mistake. Sadiq was utterly overwhelmed, and although errors were made and people died, Dante would be there to comfort him as a friend. He understood the stress of the job better than anyone, as well as the horrors of the wasteland, so just hearing those words really helped. At that moment, the sound of clicking brings Sadiq right back to the barn, realizing Dante was the Whisperer who held his eyes open and made him watch his friends die. Following the massacre, Alpha had instructed Dante to infiltrate their walls, as he was new enough to their group to not be recognized by Lydia. When inside, he would do his best to adapt to the community, utilizing his medical experience to gain trust. But his intentions were anything but helpful, as Dante had been secretly tainting the community's water supply, causing the illness that was making its way through the safe zone while relaying information about Alexandria back to Alpha. It goes without saying, Dante was also responsible for the death of the captive Whisperer, poisoning him to assure his silence while pinning the blame on his anxiety-riddled partner. It was clear to Sadiq his goal was to weaken the safe zone from the inside, and he had let himself fall right into his trap. But unfortunately, he couldn't hide the fear in his eyes, causing Dante to lunge, strangling him to death in cold blood. Rosita would catch him in the act, putting Sadiq down while knocking Dante out and throwing him into the same cell he let his Whisperer buddy die in. He had no remorse for causing chaos within the walls of Alexandria, but seems to have genuinely cared for Sadiq, regretting his death despite knowing it had to happen. According to him at least. It would remain unclear what was true or what wasn't, as Dante would be cut down by Gabriel in a fit of rage, grieving the death of his friend. Sadiq would leave behind a daughter, and as much as I would like to say his final days were lived to the fullest, the truth is, they weren't. Sadiq died during one of the hardest times of his life. This story shows us the importance of mental health even in the apocalypse, but also shows us the horrors that can come from letting strangers get too close. Dante's remix from the comics was a welcome twist, but I think some of the execution could have been done better. Why would he make the clicking sound knowing it would blow his cover? It's a bit weird, but overall, I think it works. The story of Sadiq is nothing but tragic. In my opinion, he had much more to offer in the series. But what do you guys think? Do you enjoy the story around Sadiq's death, or do you wish they took him in another direction? After the world fell to the dead, a young teenager named Noah and his family found themselves in luck, as their home fell within the walls of Shire Wilt Estates, a residential neighborhood much like Alexandria with a strong community of 20 people. With his younger twin brothers, mom, dad, and uncle all safe within the community, Noah was in a great position at the end of the world. However, this would not last forever, as one day his uncle would leave to make a supply run but would never return. Following his trail all the way to Atlanta, Noah and his father would arrive in the city, but upon searching for their missing family member, the two would be ambushed by the cops from Grady Memorial Hospital. Noah had later on described hurting his leg in a car crash he was in with his dad, but he states it happened during the outbreak, not after, so these events are more than likely not connected. But regardless, the cops would only take Noah back to the hospital, leaving his father behind to die. The Grady Memorial cops had operated by rescuing survivors in the area and forcing them to work off their debt, effectively imprisoning them as the longer they took, the more supplies they would use up, creating a cycle that was nearly impossible to escape as they exclusively preyed on the weak. Noah would be one of the few to get away, thanks to a sacrifice by Beth, who would give her life so he could make his way back home, now with a whole group of allies by his side. But upon returning to the estate, the survivors would discover everybody had been killed in an attack by a group named the Wolves, who we would come to know a little later. Everybody including Noah's mother and one of his brothers. But unfortunately, the other reanimated brothers still roam the house, biting and killing Tyrese as our group flees, realizing this place certainly would not work as their new home. Although Noah was grieving his losses, he would soon find himself in luck once again, as the group would be approached on the road by a man named Aaron, taking them back to the Alexandria safe zone to live out their lives behind safety. Noah had lost so much, but ending up in a place much like he came from was almost seen as a second chance, and not wanting to waste that, he would embrace the idea of becoming an architect much like the community's co-leader Reg, looking to the future for the first time in a while. But in the meantime, before he reached that goal, he was on supply run duty. However, on one fateful day, Noah, along with Glenn, Tara, Eugene, and Nicholas, would be trapped in a warehouse by the dead following the death of their ally Aiden in a botched run. Getting separated from the rest of the group, Noah, Glenn, and Nicholas would find themselves surrounded by walkers and trapped in what's been dubbed the revolving door of death while trying to escape. Nicholas was a complete coward, having left allies to die in the past, and this situation would be no different, as he would force his way out of the doorway, ignoring Glenn's pleas to stop pushing it open and allowing Noah to get dragged away by the walkers clawing at them from the other side. Horrifically, he would be slowly ripped apart while pinned to the glass, forcing Glenn to watch every excruciating moment with no way to help. Nicholas would later get his comeuppance, but the damage had already been done. Noah had looked to help the future of the community, but because of a completely avoidable act, his time would be cut short. Noah was a character done dirtiest by the show. He had been through a roller coaster of hope and loss, and through that grief was still able to look to the future optimistically. Noah's final words were "don't let go," but it's clear he wasn't referring to himself. He wanted Glenn to hold onto his humanity and build towards the future like he wanted to. And that is why Noah was taken from us too early. He was thinking of others even when facing death. But that's gonna do it for me today, folks. Let me know what you thought about each of these stories in the comments down below, and if you have a suggestion for future stories to cover, I'd love to hear them as well. Thanks so much for watching.